But yes, moving on. So this is Emily, and this is the final part of our Simplicity series. So we've spent, I can't remember how many there've been. Anyway, over the last month and a half or so, we've been journeying through this spiritual practice of simplicity. With the tagline of being what it means to declutter our souls and lead lives of generosity and contentment. And we thought that we'd kind of end this series actually thinking a little bit about what is the impact of our kind of societal obsession really with more, with living a life of excess, desiring things that we don't necessarily need, whether that is stuff, more money, more possessions, more things to fill our houses with, more things to fill our bellies with, or whether that is kind of an overwhelming amount of activity in our lives, in our schedules. The pace of life is very fast in our culture in this day. And so we wanted to think a little bit about the impact on other parts of the world, on some of the poorest people, maybe in our nation, but also across the world. When we obsess over more, what's the impact on them? What's the impact of that on other people? So I invited Emily along just to help us think a bit about that today. So first of all, Emily, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, maybe a little bit about your role and who you work for, but also, most importantly, a little bit about you, who you are as a person.
Thank you. This is working. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here. I do work at Oxfam, but I am here as myself. I work in publishing at Oxfam, so I in no way work on the campaigning or programme area, but I do read some of our stuff, and I learn something from the work that Oxfam does, but I really come as myself, as someone also on this journey, so I just hope I've got, just hearing a different voice might help you, because the whole series on simplicity just is absolutely essential in spirituality. So I just hope I can bring something. But so for me, yes, I work in Oxfam. I live in Cowley, and in the publishing role. And really over the last sort of 10 years I've been there, I've been on my own sort of journey, really, of learning and thinking and observing and reading and wash out my soul, as those beautiful words showed. So that's sort of where I'm at right now.
What do you like doing? Or can you describe your perfect day, Emily?
Yeah.
Like tomorrow I said you can do anything, you can go anywhere, you can spend your time however you want to. Can you give us a little flavour of what you like doing?
Yeah, my perfect day, which I might have this afternoon.
Oh, that's exciting.
This is also my perfect day. But is, I don't know, with my son who's upstairs now, I like what I call an urban adventure. So I just like to walk down Cowley Road. I like to stop for a samosa at Continental stores. I like to go into the Oxfam shop and see what I can find. I pick up a bubble tea, a mochi. I walk down. I might walk through Christchurch Meadow just to get round town and just observe, just take it all in. I just really love where we live. And I might end up probably at Blackwell and have a cup of tea. And that's my perfect day, really, is that kind of urban adventure and just see what unfolds.
We've had some good weather for such an urban adventure recently. So if you want to follow in Emily's footsteps, maybe you can go on your own, wander down Cowley Road. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And we're so grateful you're here. And sharing your thoughts and your voice is just wonderful. So you work for Oxfam.
Yeah.
Who in the room have heard of Oxfam? Woohoo! And maybe some of you realise that Oxfam is actually based just down the road. In fact, you can walk there probably from here in 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was founded 80 years ago in Oxford as the Oxford Committee for Famine Relief. And it's actually founded to raise money to relieve the Greek famine in 1940-something. I can't remember what the year was. But, Yeah, so it was originally set up as a committee in St Mary's Church in St Giles, a committee meeting to sort of address the Greek famine, which is interesting because, it was a sort of famine on European soil that was connected with the war.
I did not know that. I thought it had been started later than that. And how does your role, you said you work in publishing rather than in kind of programming or advocacy or campaigning. How does your role in the publishing team, in fact, heading up the publishing team, kind of fit into Oxfam's vision and purpose and mission?
Well, the work that Oxfam does is really trying to work with others. I mean, it's just one of a big sort of mixed picture of organisations, a lot of non-government organisations and government and private people across the world who are working to address poverty, address inequalities, address marginalisation of people, and really the sort of struggles that we're all aware of. And the work that I do in the publishing team is really just to work with those advocacy teams, the programme teams, to share their knowledge, share the experience of people who are working more directly with communities. So we do a lot of work around inequality, gender justice, climate justice, racial justice. And Oxfam's been on its own transformative journey. A lot of people will be aware of the power imbalances and difficulties that have come to light over the last few years, and it's on its own transformation journey, which we're all encouraged in Oxfam to go on our own internal transformation journey, recognising that there's sort of, as Audre Lorde said, the personal is political, that connection between our individual selves and assumptions and biases and so on is connected to this sort of global system.
Yeah, absolutely. So the personal is political, and what we think and feel and believe and how we act, we might feel very insignificant as one person, but actually that has a huge impact, actually, a ripple effect outwards. Do you know, I mean, sorry, I haven't put this question on here, but do you know how many countries Oxfam's currently working in, roughly?
Oxfam works in 90 countries, so countries across in every region of the world, and there are also 22 different Oxfams, which a lot of people I think don't know. So I work at Oxfam Great Britain, but the Oxfam International is based in Nairobi, and that's where sort of each of the country teams sort of report into the Nairobi team. And and there's Oxfam America, Oxfam Holland, lots of different Oxfams that are each raising their own money from the communities they work with and working with partners in the different countries.
Fantastic. Yeah. I've definitely learnt some things already I did not know. So as we've probably mentioned during this series on simplicity, we've been thinking about how our kind of pursuit of more in terms of material stuff, how that impacts us, in terms of has an impact on our souls and our minds and our bodies. But of course, how it has an impact as well on other people beyond ourselves, which we're thinking a bit more about today. I mean, just from your kind of observations of being a human living in Oxford, how do you kind of see that culture of excess or more playing out around you?
Well, I see it in myself. I see that kind of, you mentioned it at the start, that kind of desire to do more, think more, learn more, engage, scroll more. I'm a terrible one for that. Buy more, eat more. So I don't know. And we see it sort of in our community level, and we see it writ large. And the way Oxfam is sort of working with organisations that are really addressing the kind of the dark side of that. The fact and the massive sort of inequalities. We want more, but the truth is that some people have more than others, and it's there's a sort of a transfer of in sort of Oxfam research, a transfer of wealth upwards, leaving people behind, and the sort of massive inequalities that are reflected also in the sort of climate inequalities and in the gender and racial inequalities that we see that we can observe, and I sort of feel it inside as well. And so my own personal journey is that observing these issues is, I sort of feel like I sort of run towards the fire, that it's within, it sort of sparked so much curiosity, like why is it how it is? Why is there such trouble and inequality and conflict and these sort of paradoxes in the world? So I sort of personally feel part of me wants to cower and hide and escape, and then the pull of sort of being drawn towards it to try and understand and learn more. And, you know, I don't have the answer at all, but there are a lot of good thinkers around.
Yeah, absolutely. We know you're not a statistician. You don't necessarily have all the data at your fingertips, but are there any kind of headline things that Oxfam's working on, or in terms of, I guess, numbers or things just to help us have in mind, or even places to go if we're interested to find out a bit more about kind of global inequality? Of what are the differences between rich and poor? Is that getting better? Is that getting worse?
Well, I know from a publishing point of view that our most downloaded report every year is the report we do on global inequality, which we prepare for the World Economic Forum every year. And The Guardian said that the best thing to come out of the Davos World Economic Forum is the Oxfam report. So I take that.
Well done, you.
But no, the statistics are horrible. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you read them, but it's pretty horrible. And essentially, the kind of headline figures at this year's report was around that inequality, that 1% of people that have earned as much sort of the new wealth developed over the last 4 years as 2/3 of the rest of us, kind of thing. And
so say that again. 1%.
1% of the world's population have accrued as much wealth as 2/3 of the rest of humanity.
In the last 4 years?
Yeah, and that's since 2020. And it's reflected also in things like the output of carbon emissions. To the top 1% use as many carbon emissions as 2/3 of the population. So the statistics are there to be found. I mean, Oxfam does its research based on OECD, based on public data. So anybody is welcome to research it themselves. But that's where Oxfam puts some of its research energy to try and find out and share these things, using its sort of brand power at those sort of forums to try and raise awareness and challenge it, really, and work with others to kind of call in people to and support them to make change happen, really.
Yeah. So that is quite sobering, isn't it, really? I guess just a question about, is there an example you can think of, or that you've got to hear about in your publishing team, about maybe a project that's happening in one of those 90 countries where some of that inequality is being addressed?
Yeah. One of the things that we're sort of keen on and is to sort of break down this us and them, that it's over there, and you'll know from the work you do here, it's right here. And it's kind of making connections between the sort of systems that are affecting all of us and structures. And some of this is me talking as me. It's not necessarily Oxfam's stance, by the way. But so I don't know, a story that I just sort of read about recently and Oxfam works on sort of decent work for women and valuing women's work. And that includes care work and the sort of work that we do that's unrecognised and unrewarded and not recognised as part of the economic sort of gift, if you like. But the other part of it is sort of in paid work. So the connection, for example, between women and girls working in risky, sort of low-wage garment workers, really, in different places. And I was thinking about that. I feel that the connection between that, working in places with poor wages to produce our clothes, and connected with the sort of women and girls who are sort of driven to have to keep buying cheap clothes and feeling bad about themselves because they don't, you know, I count myself among them, bad about ourselves because we don't have being driven to buy the latest and so on. And the connection between the lives of those women and girls, the lives of these women and girls, and we're all part of that same sort of system, really. And just, I find that sort of sobering and interesting. So we're not, it's sort of looking at that big picture. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I haven't made that connection before, but actually that's a very real connection, isn't it? That if we're just thinking about the garment industry and that kind of desire for the latest piece of clothing, the cheapest piece of clothing, how actually that does have an impact negatively on both those who are creating this clothing as well as those that are actually consuming that as well, in a very different kind of way. But there's not really any winners in that.
Well, there are winners, but
yes.
it's because it's part of that kind of the economy, and that we're in. That it's part of that sort of trickle up economy, and the sort of capture of. You know, I think it's sort of hard to say who are the winners, but there are. Clearly, the inequality indicates that there are some people winning. There is enough money. It's going quite well for certain groups. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you've already touched on this, that kind of connection between what's going on here, but in terms of inequality actually here and those kind of really staggering statistics on some of the world's poorest people. Sometimes, you know, I've heard people talk about, why should we care about some person in some village over in East Africa when there's poverty here, there's inequality here? I mean, how do you kind of personally respond to that in terms of kind of caring for the needs of those that are marginalised here as well as abroad?
Yeah, well, I mean, I work in an organisation that is an international one, but it does also work on UK poverty. And I think it's a sort of privilege, really, to be able to spot the connections, to be in a setting in which you can see that, what I was reading a case study yesterday on this woman that set up a advocacy group for carers at home in the UK. I think she's Wales-based. And yeah, the drivers, the things that are affecting her are the same, very similar, not the same, but very similar to those that are affecting women in East Africa, women in Bangladesh, women in Canada. I think it's those connections between them, and so. I think our lives are so inextricably linked to the lives of others that we're all sort of affected by so many of these issues, whether it's women's rights, climate, it's affecting all of us globally. I mean, we can see it in our own gardens. So. Yeah, I mean, my feeling is, yes, you absolutely need to be generous here, and it's not an and or an or, it's and you need to think about others in other situations, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, just finally, so we just wondered whether you had any thoughts or encouragements for us, or thoughts maybe from your own life, habits or practices that you've been engaging with as you've been on this journey. You've talked about your kind of own inner journey of thinking these things through, but just some things you might want to leave us with to encourage us as we kind of come to the end of this series, put some of this stuff into practice.
Well, I mean, in a way, I think one of the sort of learnings from the work and reading I've been doing is about these sort of complex systems. But on the other hand, the antidote is simplicity. So I think the sort of coming back to self, coming back to community, whilst not kind of thinking you're superior anyway or different particularly, but sort of addressing that inner journey as you do so well here. For me, I think I told you this the other day. There's this story that I read that just really resonates for me, that I think links where the boots story. There was a woman looking in a shop window at these boots, and so resonated for me. I need these boots. I want these boots. These boots are going to fill a hole. They're going to make me happy, and so on. And then she saw her reflection. She walked a moment, saw her reflection, and she had the boots on. they were sort of. She'd already got those boots, and I could so totally relate to that, because it's that feeling, and I think it links with your spirituality question and simplicity. Is that it's just we are enough. We have enough. We are safer and more secure than we realise in this context, where we have what we need inside. And yes, you also need to eat and clothe yourself, so on. But I think, I think for me, it's just that kind of daily practice, really, which is a daily practice, as you'll know. And daily work, in a way, of coming back to self and sort of realising that you have enough, that you're a part of this system, that we're all connected, and we are of value. So it's just as, and you don't have to fill it with doing other things and buying and so on. It's just, I think, that sort of reassurance within myself, and I feel that to me is the sort of antidote to the big issues, but not with a kind of escaping or scapegoating, or it's just it's and go towards it sort of thing. It's sort of where I am today. It varies all the time, but that's where I am today. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much.
Thank
Let's
you.
give her a big round of applause.
Thank you, everyone.
Just put it there. Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing from your heart, sharing from your experience, and offering that to us. So we're going to be finishing our time together shortly, but just a couple of final thoughts that also link in with the gift day that Josh shared about halfway through our worship time this morning. But yeah, just again, thank you, Emily, so much for your time this morning, and also for preparing and thinking about what you were going to share with us. So a few final thoughts on how we might become people of greater generosity and gratitude, those 2 G's that Josh mentioned, Darren had shared with us a couple of weeks ago. And how might we be people that actually are addressing that inequality that we've just heard about, both in our nation and across the world. So if we want to follow Jesus as our hero, the one that we want to be like, to imitate, then he does ask us to offer him our money, all of our time, our talents, all of our resources to him. And the reason we can do that is because we actually might come to the conclusion that we can believe that he has the best possible plans for us, and that in doing so, living his way, we really can have access to the best possible life, a bit like Emily was just sharing, kind of we're a bit more free from those external pressures to have more, to be more. We can have access to a greater life of peace and joy. And at the end of this life on earth, access to a perfect life, free from every kind of suffering that goes on and on and on and on, with God, our Maker, forever. So just a little bit about that thing of gratitude. So as we give our resources out of gratitude for everything that God has done for us, some of the stuff that we were touching on in those words from those worship songs earlier, we're remembering as we give our resources to him that he has allowed us to have access to that kind of life that I've just mentioned by dying in our place so that we can be completely forgiven and made right with God. We can love, we can be generous, we can give to him and to others because he first loved us, in the words of the Gospel, John chapter 1, verse 4. So therefore, giving our money to address inequality, along with everything else that we might give to him, time, our talents, is an act of worship. It's an act of saying thank you as a small token for everything that he has done for us. And then generosity. So giving generously, we do so if we want to follow Jesus because it's in God's nature. He, as we've just said, gave everything for us. He never held back. He never does still hold back from us because we are his dearly loved creatures. Every human being is a dearly loved creature, unique, precious, worthy of God's love, and to be treated with the utmost dignity and care. And that's why when we hear those kind of statistics that Emily was just sharing, 1% having as much wealth as 2/3 of the rest of the world, that must break God's heart, surely. And within those 2/3, a large proportion of those will be living well below the poverty line, on very, very, very little indeed, barely being able to survive, if to survive at all. So if that breaks God's heart, if we want to be like God, then we need to let God break our heart over those kind of things as well. If we long to see God's kingdom of love advance, then every time that we are generous, we step out in generosity, whether that is giving a bit towards this gift day, or it's being kind to our neighbour, or it's turning the other cheek when someone's unkind to us, whatever it is, whenever we are generous, the kingdom of God is coming more in our lives, but it's also coming in the lives of those that might benefit from that action. In the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 11, Paul says this, you, and he's speaking to the church in Corinth, you will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. To God has enriched us, he's given us everything, and he wants us to know how generous he's been so that we can be generous on every occasion. And generosity breeds generosity. And it breeds joy, and it points people back to the one that we follow, back to God. So as Josh said earlier, we have an opportunity to put all of this into practice today and over the next few weeks with this gift day on the 14th of July. Just wanted to say a couple of practical things about that and how that's going to work. So firstly, if you call Hope Vineyard your spiritual home, your church family, then we'd encourage you to engage with this, to think about this over the next few weeks, to give to this, in addition to what you already might give regularly to church. So if you're visiting today, if you're not part of the family, if you wouldn't call yourself a follower of Jesus, please feel free to let this whole thing pass you by, unless you particularly want to give. In the Old Testament, there were lots of different sacrifices and gifts that the people made, but they sometimes made these free will offerings, which is a bit like what this gift day is. These were spontaneous, voluntary gifts that were given by people, as opposed to gifts or sacrifices that they made regularly, maybe because they wanted to ask for forgiveness because somebody had done something wrong, or because of a vow, an agreement that they had made. Me and Josh felt it might be helpful just to give you a flavour of how we'll be engaging with this and how we kind of think about these things when these kind of opportunities arise. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be asking God separately, praying, what is the amount that you would have us give, and also praying and talking with each other about that. And we'll be asking ourselves the question, what might being generous and trusting God look like in this moment? So for us, it's not just about what's the smallest amount that we could possibly give so that we can still pay the bills, or we can still go on holiday in the summer, or we can still give our kids whatever they want. Actually, what does generosity, trust and faithfulness in God look like in this moment? And how might we get involved in contributing? And we'll also be thinking like this with our children. We want to encourage our children to be generous givers. And so we'll be talking with them about it and also wondering with them, not putting pressure on them, but wondering if they also want to contribute out of their pocket money or birthday money or whatever they have towards this as well. But we will also be being honest with ourselves and with our children about the cost that sometimes comes with being generous. Sometimes maybe it means you can't have the next pair of trainers that you want, or you can't have that extra packet of sweets, or whatever it might be. Sometimes there comes a cost. But if we trust that God has the best possible life and plans for us, then actually in the most important ways we will never go without. And God has a wonderful habit of blessing us in very surprising, wonderful ways right when we need it. So if you want to give towards this, you've got a couple of weeks. The last day that you can give is that Sunday, the 14th of July. A few days after that, we will then kind of tot up whatever's been given and announce it the following Sunday on the 21st of July. How to give? Head to the website. It's on the front page of the website, along with those 4 slides that Josh showed of the 4 different initiatives that we're going to be giving to. So hopefully it's incredibly straightforward. The link to fill in the giving bit is on there below those slides as well. Finally, just wanted to reiterate this if it's not clear already. There is absolutely no compulsion or pressure from us to give anything at all. 2 Corinthians 9 says this: each one must give as he or she has decided in their heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Apparently, I couldn't actually find this, but apparently in another translation it says, for God loves an hilarious giver. Like the level of joy that God wants us to experience when we give to his work is kind of spectacularly wonderful. He wants us to give freely out of joy as an act of gratitude and with great generosity. So we are just going to pray to close and and then we'll go on our way to whatever the rest of Sunday has for us. So Father, we thank you for this opportunity. And actually, I pray for some of us now where we feel like, oh no, someone's trying to make me give money. Maybe, or oh no, I'm struggling with my own financial stuff. It's hard to even contemplate thinking about giving to anyone or anything else. Lord, any of that kind of weighty stuff, would it just come off us right now? Pressure and anxiety about our own finances. Any sense of guilt about how we manage money or how we feel maybe we mismanage money. Would actually that just release off us? Because we do not want anybody to be giving out of guilt or compulsion, but to be giving as an hilarious, cheerful giver. Lord, and I just pray, would there be freedom for every single person in this room as they think about this, whether or not they give in a couple of weeks' time, but just freedom to know that you are a trustworthy, good God, that we can never outgive you. We can never be more generous than you have been or will be to us. That we are your dearly loved creatures. And on top of that, we have the joy of getting to partner in your kingdom work, extending your kingdom to be a great blessing to those around us in this country, on our doorstep, and those maybe that we will never know or never meet many, many miles away across the world. So with joy and peace and freedom abound.